I wonder if you think about life and how you live it. I wonder if there's any good procrastinators out there. Anyone willing to admit that you like procrastination? Okay, so I'll put my hand up. There are things that I naturally procrastinate over. I like when you're at school and there's an exam coming up. As much as the teachers might say in that first week, if everyone just puts in 30 minutes a week, then, by the time the test comes, did anyone put in 30 minutes? Good on you if you did. But I put in all of those 30 minutes right at the end, just before the exam. You procrastinate, and then panic, and then somehow you get through. Or like my shed at home is great, but because it's got doors on it, I can shut it, and no one has to go into it. It's my shed, and so it's a mess, but it's my mess, and I'm going to leave it that way until we have to move house one day. There are things that we procrastinate over, and probably one of the things that we procrastinate over most is having difficult conversations. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like difficult conversations. They're hard to have when we've got to speak to someone about something they've said or they've done, or something we've said or we've done. It's easy to just kind of like think, it'll just all work out. Like surely if I just say nothing, it'll all blow over, everything will be fine. We'll just keep going on. But we know we've got to get and engage in those conversations so we can naturally procrastinate towards things. This week, we're starting a new series. We're calling it Plan A. It's actually a series that a number of churches around our state are doing. And it's all about sharing our faith. Because sharing our faith, I think we get the idea that it's important. But so often, it's one of those things that we feel, I'm concerned. What if that conversation goes badly? What if it creates conflict? What if when I'm going to be sharing my faith, what if they ask me a question that I don't know the answer to? There are a whole bunch of reasons why we might put that on the back burner and think, I'll just leave that off until later. But the truth is that when we look at sharing our faith and what God has called us to, it's actually His plan A. His plan A, his one plan, and He doesn't have a plan B. His plan for the world knowing about Him is by using us. And that's a bit scary, right? To kind of think that His one delivery method is not a band of evangelistic angels. They're not all waiting up there thinking, oh man, when these guys fail one more time, we're coming in, calling in the cavalry. No, he sends each of us into a very specific workplace, school, family. He's ingrained us into these different places within our society. We become the place that people who don't yet know Jesus will come to know Jesus. We are the plan A. And over this series, we're going to be unpacking a bit of what it is to share our faith. And we'll be using 5 words to do that. They are growing, knowing, sowing, rowing, and showing up. So all of these end in ing, right? And they're all action words. The heart of it is to say that as we look at this thing called the Great Commission that we'll speak about in a minute, this idea that Jesus gave to His disciples and then to all of us who are His disciples after that, is that our role is to go and share our faith. But in sharing our faith, there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do to grow into the kind of people who would not just think, I've got to do that, or I could procrastinate about that, but actually it becomes something much more of who we are rather than a thing that we do. It becomes a natural expression of our faith, something that we grow in passion about, rather than something that we choose to put off. This idea of the Great Commission is actually a few words, a little statement that Jesus gave to His disciples. So we've just had Easter, and after Easter, Jesus died on the cross, rose again, and then 40 days later, so he saw His disciples, interacted with His disciples, and Paul in the letter of Corinthians says that there was 5,000 people that were still alive at the time of his writing that would still say that they saw Jesus risen from being dead. Okay, so a lot of people saw Jesus in these 40 days. But right on the last day, Jesus then ascended up into heaven. And just before He did so, He spoke to His disciples and gave them this, it's kind of like the the coach's halftime speech. What one thing do you want to give your troops before they go out and win the State of Origin again? And this is what Jesus said to his troops just before they were about to go out into it. He said this. He said, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." This was Jesus' last statement. And then all the disciples went, "Yeah!" And then they ran out to the field to play life. Jesus said, "Go." The interesting thing about this word, "go," is that a lot of, missionary organizations often use this as a term to say, that means we've got to go. And a lot of Christians who read this go, "Oh no," because the idea of going seems a bit scary when we really like living here. Maybe we even feel called to living right here. And then we read this, we've got to go. But actually in the original language, it's much more the term "as you go." The idea of as you live out your life, go. So if we change and we shift that and we think the whole point of this statement is not to go, but actually the point of the statement is to make disciples, it flips around a bit and it says, as you go into life, as you go about your life, make disciples of all nations. So that shifts a little bit and helps us to think about the going is more of a lifestyle thing rather than a once-off thing, or rather than a go over there kind of thing. It's saying that as we go throughout our life, our role is to be making disciples. Now, making disciples is a kind of a big thing. It can be something that we think, it's so amorphic, it's so kind of like out there, I don't really understand. What does that mean to make disciples? Well, essentially a disciple is someone who's growing in their relationship with Jesus. A couple of weeks ago at the Queensland Baptist Annual Convention, a speaker from a church down in Melbourne, and actually the lady who is heading up Alpha also spoke to this. They were both saying that oftentimes we think about discipleship as in someone makes a commitment of faith and then discipleship begins. And so it's like evangelism, scary, we're not very good at that, and then discipleship. Okay, we can do that, get into a life group, join a church, connect with a community of faith. And what they were both saying is, actually, if we shift that to say discipleship happens a lot earlier. And the example is, Jesus' disciples were disciples long before they were lifelong committed followers, right? Like when he first said, "Come and follow me," they weren't at that point in time of their life, "We're committed to you 100%, we believe you're God." No, it took them years to get to that point. And so if we shift our mind to think making disciples is growing someone closer in their relationship with Jesus, is helping them to take a step forward in their faith, perhaps from absolutely hating God towards, God might be interested in my life, then we all can play a role in helping people to come to know Jesus, to move people on in their faith, just one little bit. And that's the heart of this series, is to look at discipleship as probably a broader thing, to say, as we share our faith, that is part of someone's journey rather than always being the point of conversion. Because we do want people to get to that point. We do want someone to come to a point of saying, I didn't believe in Jesus, now I do. I didn't know God, now I know God. I didn't give my life, I didn't serve, I didn't honor God, now I serve and honor God. So we want this shift to happen. We want this shift to take place. But when we think of it as that moment of someone coming to faith, sometimes it means that we hear the stories of that happening and we think, I could never do that. I don't know if you've ever heard these stories. They're supposed to encourage us, these stories when someone comes to faith. And oftentimes it happens on an aeroplane. You hear a pastor say, sitting in an aeroplane and someone beside me, and at the end of the flight, that person had given their life to Jesus, they've been baptized in the sink somewhere, and their life completely changed. And sometimes it can be kind of like, is anyone watching Grandmasters Lego? Any Lego fans? Okay, really, really bad example. Okay, a couple of maybes. So essentially, people who are insanely good at Lego, right? They have, 20 hours to build stuff that at the end you just look and go, wow, I've never seen that. That is amazing. How did they come and think with this pile of Lego bricks they could come up with something so amazing? And they do it every week, every episode, more amazing things happen. when we look at that, do we look and go, oh man, that's it, I'm done. Never playing with Lego ever again in my life because I can never do that? Or do we look at that and go, oh, I've got a Lego set at the back in the cupboard. Maybe I'll start playing again. The idea of Lego Masters is to kind of draw us into playing with Lego again, enjoying being creative. And the great thing about Lego is it starts way back with a simple pack. And if you want to start early, it's like the 5+ packs are a good one to start with. And they've got books inside of them with putting 3 bits of Lego in every page. It's like, oh, there's another 3 bits I have to put in that picture. Look back at the last bit. Oh, right, that's the bit there. Yep, add that bit on. And until it becomes the thing, whatever is on the front of the packet, a car or a spaceship. In a similar way, sometimes we can look at sharing our faith and we can see the huge stories, or we can watch someone debating about faith and we can think, oh man, that person's a grandmaster. I could never do that. And instead of going, wow, that's exciting, I want to engage with that, we go, oh, that's scary, I could never do that, and we step away from it. But instead, we should look and say, oh, that's something that I want to engage with. And the greatest thing is that the Bible actually gives us helps on ways to just take mini steps. Not only that, there are great Bible passages, but there are great videos that we can watch that help us to understand the basics of the gospel. We can look at our life and see what God did in us. And when we come to share our faith, we can share that with other people. We can take baby steps towards helping people to know who Jesus is. And probably the greatest way that we can do this, and the main focus of the message today, is that we can grow in our faith. If we want other people to grow in their faith, it starts with us growing in ours. I love the idea you can't give what you don't have, right? So if you don't have faith, then it's hard to give that away. If you don't have an understanding of who Jesus is and what he did for you in your life, it's hard to give that away to anyone else or encourage anyone else to know about it. The idea of a master, I read, it said that you need to do 10,000 hours of an activity to be able to become an expert at it. And when I was looking at that, I thought, oh man, 10,000 hours to become an expert. What did Jesus do? He did 3 years of intensive apprenticeship with his disciples. 3 years, they kind of lived with him. That was well over 10,000 hours he spent with them so that then they could go on and be kind of professionals. If this is all the food you get, kind of half an hour on a Sunday, it would take you 380 years to become like a professional, competent at understanding God. That's a long time, right? Man. 380 years. I'm not living that long. So that's why we need to go, okay, well, how can I break it down through the week to get these 10,000 hours? That means we're going to have to engage with the Bible regularly through the week. Look at some passages, understand, grow in our knowledge of God through digging into his word. That's why we do need to get with other people, join a life group and be able to talk to others about our faith and about their life and about how that's working, encourage each other. We need to spend time praying and talking to God. The best way you get better at prayer is by praying. Everyone's like, whoa, write that down. You get better at praying by praying. Wow, you just spend time with God and talk to him and you kind of improve the more you do it. And so the more we practice our faith, the more that we live out our faith, then we grow. You know, when Jesus said the Great Commission to his disciples, that's at the end of the book of Matthew. That's right at the end. They've finished their apprenticeship. It's like, well done, guys. You're fully qualified. You're ready to go out there. But at the start of that same book of Matthew, he speaks about character growth. He says, you guys have to grow in your understanding of who you need to be now that we're in a relationship so your character can grow to be more like me. And so when we go back to Matthew chapter 5, we see a list of kind of character traits that Jesus shares about people who have been affected by him. It says, now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is what Jesus said to people when he was first kind of interacting with them and helping them to understand what kind of character traits you would have if you became a follower, if you became kind of a master at being a Christian, if you became close to Jesus. These are the kind of character traits you might have. And he goes through a list that for us feels as though it's pretty countercultural to the way that we would want life to be. Because when we look at this list of poverty and meekness and poor and, merciful sounds good, pure in heart sounds good, but those who mourn doesn't sound like something we want to do. And a couple of things I think are really important to understand about the Beatitudes. The first one is, Jesus is sharing this with a group of people who he's in the north of the country, and it says just before this that people came from Syria, the country to the north. They came from over the Jordan, so modern day Jordan. They came from all over Israel in a time where there wasn't cars where you could just drive there, in a time where people had to walk. And so they wouldn't have even 100% known where Jesus was, but they had heard rumors that this man was doing incredible healings, was changing people's lives, was growing people in their faith incredibly. And so they walked from hundreds of kilometers away to where they had heard Jesus was, and they came, and crowds came to him. And so looking out, I just had this picture. Looking out, Jesus looks at the people, and what does he see? He sees poverty. He sees brokenness. He sees pain. He sees people who are going through trouble in their life, who are so desperately seeking healing that they would walk for miles and miles to come to Jesus. And so Jesus isn't looking out and going, my kingdom is about people who have it all together. My kingdom is about people who have wealth. I only want wealthy people here. My kingdom's about people who are looking good, wearing the right clothing. Jesus is looking out on this massive crowd of people, and he says, my kingdom is about all the qualities that you possess in small amounts and thinks that they're terrible. My kingdom is about flipping them on their head and seeing that actually the kingdom principles are around poverty of spirit, knowing that we're desperately in need. Without God, we need him. Those who seek righteousness, who hunger and seek after God. Those who are meek, and that idea is that you have strength, that it's restrained. You don't use your strength to hurt people, but because of that strength that you're restraining, you allow people to have a greater honor than you. It's this kingdom of humility that Jesus is sharing. He's looking at these people and they're getting it. They're going, oh, right, so I fit into this new amazing kingdom. And their minds were being blown by this as Jesus was sharing with them. So the first thing is we need to see that Jesus was bringing the broken. He wants the broken because the broken realize that they have nothing when they come to Jesus. And this is one of the hardest things that we need to preach to ourselves when we come to Jesus, is that instead of coming and saying, well, God, I've done this and I've done this and I've done this, and I've got this degree and I've done enough, I've been working for 5 years, look at my work ethic, all these great things that I can do for you, God. Instead, we come to him and say, you are everything. I've got nothing. I've got nothing of value because, God, you are everything of value. And so when I come into your kingdom, I recognize you as the king and the creator of all, the wonderful one. I just come and worship and honor you. I just thank you because the greatest thing that I needed was to have all of the bad things that I've done taken away. I needed to come under your power and your control. And so instead of a kingdom of power, the powerful one, we come under him and we say we want to honor and glorify you. So the first thing that's important is to say the kingdom is for all, and for everyone who comes to him, we see how we really are truly in his kingdom. And the second thing that is super important in understanding the Beatitudes is that these changes, these kind of character traits are exactly what Jesus expressed on the cross. he expressed his poverty of spirit when he said, my God, why have you forsaken?" He gave up relationship with God so he could be in relationship with us. He mourned the sin that we create. He mourned his relationship that was with the Father as he took on sin onto himself. He was meek. He was power restrained on the cross. He was thirsting for our righteousness in the way that he gave that to us. As we look at the Beatitudes, we see the character traits of Jesus. And so instead of our idea of, I just have to try to take on those character traits, instead we say, no, I have to try to love Jesus more. And the more I love Jesus, the more of his character I start to transform into. I become more and more like him. The more I love him, the more I come to know him and understand him. The more I come into relationship with him. And so instead of just thinking, how do I change my character? We start to think, how do I change to love Jesus more? And the more we love Jesus, the more our character then changes. We become more and more like him, like who he has created us to be. Mike Frost, in his book, Surprise the World, he said this about the early church. These ordinary believers devoted themselves to sacrificial acts of kindness. They loved their enemies and forgave their persecutors. They cared for the poor and fed the hungry. In the brutality of life under the Roman rule, they were the most stunningly different people anyone had ever seen. Indeed, their influence was so surprising that the 4th century Emperor Julian feared they might take over the empire. The early church was transforming the world they live in. And the church, or the Christian faith, the reality of grace and mercy has changed and continues to change the world that we live in. The more and more that we grow closer to Jesus, the more that we're going to be engaging the government with things that we believe they should be upholding. The more and more we engage our culture in the things that we believe we should be involved in. And so the more and more we grow closer to Jesus, the more and more we influence the world that we're in for good. And at the same time, the more and more it seems as though we are persecuted because of what we believe. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." We live in a time where, as much as we would love to, we want to be changing the culture. We also have a culture that surrounds us that is increasingly hostile to the Christian message. We live in a world around us where it seems as though the media is very negative towards Christianity. And there are things that Christians do wrong. Absolutely. I'm not saying that's not the case at all. But when you see the vigor and the vitriol that comes against churches as opposed to other organizations, when you see things like the Royal Commission into institutional child sex abuse, which was terrible and should never have been done by churches at all. But who gets 99% of the blame? The churches do. Not all of the different organizations that were involved in letting children down over the years. We see time and time again the church being persecuted, not in a physical way as it has been in the Roman Empire in the 1st century, but much more in political ways and cutting down the character of the church, of the body of believers. And so what do we do in that? What do we do in the face of the heart that we want to be growing closer to Jesus, the heart that we want to be shining the light of the gospel into the world around us? What do we do in the midst of the struggles and the persecutions that we're faced with? I think the key is that we would continue to shine the light where we are. We continue to do what we can do. I love the Easter festival for this. Last week, Kirsten shared after the Easter festival, she said she was talking to a lady, and the lady said to her that they have been coming, they look forward to this every year. They've been coming for years, and her kids have been kind of growing up, coming along and loving this, looking forward to coming. And I just thought, how good is that? That when we think about the influence of our world, the influence of people speaking the name of Jesus in negative ways, or speaking about the church in a negative context. How many people in our community who come and get a free, fun Easter Sunday afternoon will say, I don't know about those churches, but this church here gives away a free Easter and my kids love coming every year. How many people from our community will have joy in their hearts every Easter because of the things that we put on for free and for the serving that we all do to be able to allow people to have that experience? How many young people go through the gospel stations and get to see and understand what Easter is all about every year as they come? Now, I know it's only a couple of hours on one day, and so how much impact could it have? Well, maybe it'll just grow them this much in their journey of faith. How much then do we do as a church as we reach out and connect to our community? How much then do the words that you say and the character that you display throughout your life, how your growth as a believer in Jesus will bring people as they see our lives? Will that bring them to think, okay, well, I don't know about all Christians, but this one that I know, they seem all right. This one that I know, there's something about their character, there's something about who they are that shifts me to believe that maybe Christians aren't all terrible. What can we do in the world that we live in to bring people's attention to the creator of the universe and help them to know that he is loving and kind? He wants to heal the brokenhearted. He wants to bring people into right relationship with him. It's our role to do that, and one of the greatest ways we can do that is that we are growing in our relationship with him. So when the world sees, they see people who love Jesus and who honor him, who are respectful and loving to those around them, and who are growing in character that imitates the character of Jesus. How are we reflecting Jesus' goodness in our lives today? Let's pray.